Well, hello. It's Friday afternoon. I'm recording the videos in the quiet of the church building this afternoon for next week, and looking forward to the Lord's Day, seeing you all, hopefully. And I'm going to read a sermon to us over the next, few sessions from Calvin. There's actually two sermons here that I want to share with you. One is, and we're going to begin with this one, on valuing membership in God's church and the freedom to worship Him. And the next one is on striving to serve God purely in a Christian church. Both of these come from Psalm 27. On valuing membership in God's church and the freedom to worship Him. These are some sermons that were published by the Banner of Truth in this wonderful little edition here. That's the dust jacket, Faith Unfeigned. And these came to us translated into English by Robert White. And this edition, the Banner edition, is a 2010 publication. It was first published in French, of course, Calvin's native tongue. And it first appeared in English edition in 1579 in London. And so this edition is based on the original French text, which is in Calvin's, it's just called the Opera series, Calvini Opera, and on. There's a long name to that collection. But this was first, as I said, first published in 1552 in Geneva, a brief exposition of the Psalms, and these are just a series of different Psalms. By the way, I'll go ahead and tell you now, the chapter that precedes, well, not immediately, but the first chapter is titled On Fleeing Outward Idolatry. That would be a good one for you as well. We took a look at how easy it is for us to be idolaters just a couple of weeks ago from Isaiah. It's a major theme in the Bible, and therefore it should be a major theme in our Christian lives to put to death all those things that can become idols in our heart and replace our great God, who alone deserves first and only place. But here, Sermon 3 on valuing membership in God's church and the freedom to worship Him. I don't have to tell you, we live in an age, you probably have friends who, I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church. I'm not a member of the church. None of that church stuff for me. Well, guess what? The Bible says you can't be and have that view of the church. John says you can't say that you love God and you don't love His people, His image bearers. And the things we love, we like to be with, don't we? That'd be like saying, I love my wife, but I don't really enjoy her company. We've got separate bedrooms, and she's got her favorite things to do and her friends, and I've got mine, and I love her. Well, that's the same thing as saying, I trust Jesus, I'm a Christian, but I don't like the church. Don't want anything to do with it. Here's Sermon 3, important for the church today. There are even churches that don't have membership. They don't hold anyone accountable. They don't know who comes and who goes. How would you discipline sinners in your midst, which is a mark of the true church? Well, they don't, and so they're not a true church in that sense. All sorts of trails we can go down here with the importance of one's ecclesiology, that is their doctrine of church. And in the middle of the doctrine of the church is this thing of church membership attendance. We have question 4 in the vows. and do promise to support the worship and work of the church to the best, not the minimal, but the best of your ability. Well, I'm sad to say we even have some covenant folks who take the minimalist approach after having vowed to God that vow. Dangerous ground there. Sermon 3 on valuing membership in God's church and the freedom to worship Him. The text is Psalm 27:4. I've asked one thing of God, and that I will seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, that I might see the beauty of the Lord and gaze upon His temple. It's extraordinary, Calvin says, to see how varied are the things that men desire, and yet there's one point of general agreement on which all are determined: to waste their time on the things of this world. Each individual has his own particular goal and method, but in their vanity all men everywhere look only to this perishable life for blessing and happiness. No better evidence exists of man's thoroughly brutish nature. For we were created for a completely contrary purpose: to aspire to God's heavenly kingdom, even while we live in this world. That's why the present life is called a journey or pathway. So unless we deliberately choose to forfeit God's eternal inheritance, we must, at a first step, give up those silly fancies which so absorb us and keep us captive to this world. Our chief desire instead should be to seek out God, and nothing should stop us from at least making that our aim. I say at least because all earthly affections which can only separate us from God must of necessity be torn from our hearts, so that we may move swiftly forward in the journey we must make. But because we are far from possessing this kind of purity, we must, in the second place, overcome all the obstacles which hold us back, and must pursue our course regardless. Despite our infirmities, we should prefer the life of heaven to whatever is of the earth. We must therefore ask how this can be done. It's not for us to speculate. We must accept the means which God has ordained, the chief of which David identifies as the ordered ministry and governance which God has established in His church. These enable us to receive instruction from His Word, to worship Him with one accord, to call upon Him in prayer, and to employ the sacraments as helps. Such training is necessary if we would grow in faith, in the fear of God, in holiness, in contempt for the world, and in love of the heavenly life. It is with this in mind that David declares that he wishes above all to dwell in God's temple. By the word temple, he means the freedom to worship God purely in the assembly of believers, to confess his faith, to pray, and to share in the sacraments. For in those days God had chosen a definite place where He intended sacrifice to be made and homage paid to Him. There, as the one and only God, men were to learn His law and to have manifest proof of His presence. In desiring to dwell in temple, David shows why it means so much to him. It is there that God's beauty is to be seen. He thus reveals that in itself the temple was nothing. He thinks only of the use for which it was intended. Let me reread something. David shows why it means so much to him to dwell in the temple, not because the temple was going to be so grand. Remember, he didn't get to build it. He only got to hear the plans for it and gather the materials. But they had a place to go for the sacrifices, etc., in the tabernacle, of course. But it says, it is there in God's gathered people, just like when we gather on Sunday morning, Sunday night here. It is there that God's beauty is to be seen. Now, how could he say that? Well, I'm just going to say it quickly. The only place we see God in bodily form is in the church gathered. Remember what the church is? The church gathered, the bride of Christ. As nobody ever thought a bride was not beautiful. So we see the bride, we see the beauty of God's wonderful bride, and we see God's pleasure there. We see God revealed to us in this gathered body. If we believed that it was only the material building which appealed to David, we would be doing him much injury and wrong, because that would be to credit him with superstition rather than with virtue. We must therefore understand that what David esteems is the external order which shapes the life of believers in the church. In short, he points out that belonging to God's church is a priceless gift and privilege. There we have access to the means by which our kindly Father allows his children to draw near to him. Well, that's where we'll stop for the day. Think about that. Ponder that. You may even want to listen to this marvelous beginning to Calvin's sermon on valuing God's church and the freedom to worship him. Until the next time, God bless.